Hey everybody, we are back. This is XL 10 Minute Leaders Live. My name's Graham Brown. You know, one of the things about leadership is not avoiding the tough conversations, getting straight in there and talking about what matters most, not dancing around the subject. So let's talk about the tough conversations. With us today, we have an expert, an author in the subject of tough conversations. We're going to look at probably challenging a few assumptions and social institutions in the process. Dr. Pam Gurley joining us from the US. Pam, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Ooh, it's early here.
Yeah, which part of the US are you in?
I'm currently in Alabama, so it's about what four, almost 5 o'clock in the morning here.
Wow, Alabama. I think it's probably a good context as well for the conversations today as well. I mean, all the
Oh, yeah.
places in the US, the tough conversations. It has a history, right? So, Pam, we're going to talk about what you talk about, the books and your writing and your work as well. We've got 10 minutes. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Okay. So, Dr. Pam, let's kick off. You may have a business card, you may not, but if you do, if you don't, what's on it?
I do have a business card. Of course, it has my name. It has, a list of actually my companies. I own four companies and my contact information, my emails, www.clarkenhillenterprise.com, as well as www.imdrpgurley.com. Phone numbers, contacts. So that's pretty much on my business card, just how to contact me.
All right. Well, we're going to ask you for the contacts at the end as well. What are you a doctor in?
Management, and I'm also a adjunct grad school professor. I teach business.
Okay. And so you've got four different companies in, I know there's different interests there. In summary, what is it that you do?
So, in summary, I am a tech writer. So, no matter what is branding, article writing, business plan writing, some grant essay writings. So, but I'm a tech writer. And then because I interview, which is one of my companies, it still leads back to writing. So, pretty much in a nutshell, I am a phenomenal writer. I'm an author, I'm a writer. So,
Yeah.
yes.
What have you written recently, book
Two
wise?
children's books. That's my most recent today. That just released those June 3rd, and then back in March I released another book and called Black Girl Activist, and then 2019, towards the end of 2019, I wrote one called I Am Not a Stereotype. I Am HER. So just been a little bit busy.
I bet. You choose difficult conversations as well. You choose to go straight to the main thing, if you
That's what
like.
my books do.
Yeah, and what sort of angle do you take? Because who are you writing for? Are you writing for specifically black readers, African Americans, or are you reading for a wider audience?
So I feel like I'm writing for a wider audience, although it is tailored for the Black community. And what I mean by that is I've had conversations with my white counterparts or my white peers, and they will always say, I want to either come into the rooms or I want to buy, but I'm not sure if it's for me. In order to advocate and understand how to challenge these social institutions, you have to know how we think, you have to know what we need. So I write books to help people understand so that we can start tearing down the barriers that we have so that we can have people advocate for us the right way.
Yeah, and how much that's needed as well. One of the
Hmm.
challenges for people who aren't black, so white people, all different races as well, is not knowing how to talk about it. You,
Yeah.
you
But
feel
it
that
also,
you're just tread on eggshells or it's a minefield. You're going to say something wrong and offend somebody, right?
correct. But I think it's also more than marching. I think it's knowing what you are marching for, understanding why we are asking for social justice or equity, and not just diversity, but equity and equality. So that way we all have some level of liberation. You look at the LGBT community, some of them are still very scared to step out. They're affected too. So to understand what that feels like to not be privileged, You have to know how the conversations are taking place in our community so that you can properly advocate. I also think that the world is a cultural melting pot. It's important that you know, if you have biracial grandchildren that, or or biracial children, that you know how to advocate for them the right way, as opposed to not really understanding what that process might be like for them, or that their experiences as they grow up will be like.
What are the challenges now? What tends to be the resistance? I mean, let's forget about the idiots. Let's put them aside because the idiots are just feeding the idiots with more idiotic media. Let's put them aside and let's talk about everybody else, which is, you know, reasonably intelligent people, I suppose, who are curious, interested. What tends to be the uphill now? Because it's not like this is not an issue now. The media
Correct.
is full of it. So, what tends to be the hurdles that we face?
So I think, for one, social injustice is huge because you see that all over. I think that we are, in terms of the Black community, are very underrepresented, and we are not, we have no pay equity. There's healthcare disparities. The marginalized communities don't have access to things. These are conversations that really need to be had at a very high level. But I also think that we look too far when we're looking at presidential and congressional um, voting. We really need to be looking in our community, because that's where it really
Hmm.
starts. It's about getting the proper health care and proper education, dollars and funding. That does not only come from the federal, it also comes from the state and the local governments. So we need to be paying attention to how our mayors and our governors and our city council and all of these people are funding our communities, and what they're giving us and how they are advocating for us. This is why I write about those things, because it's so important to move out of being marginalized, from in moving from being underrepresented, and giving representation the way that it needs to be done. And it's not really based on color, it is really based on cultural enrichment and equity and
Hmm.
equality.
Let's think about where we are now and where we have been in the last 2 years. We've experienced I dare I say it, that word, unprecedented 18 months. We've experienced the pandemic. We've, in the US at least, experienced a change of administration, maybe for the better. And then we've also had Black Lives Matters. And, it's a year almost now. So it's been a crazy time. Would you say that it's been a good time? What's the positives come out of this? Because I imagine people, when they're talking about color, when they're talking about margins, when they're talking about underrepresentation of voices, it can be overwhelming, and you think it's just too big. There's too much. It's too difficult. It's too endemic. It's too entrenched in the system. The last 18 months, Pam, are there any positives to take away?
Several. I think that the last 18 months really allowed people to deal with themselves. So that's one, from a mental health standpoint. It forced them to slow down, because so much, many of us, especially entrepreneurs or work, anyone who was working, was just working and working and working, not realizing the lack of care they were giving themselves. So I think that was one of the biggest spins that's come out of the pandemic, is
Mm.
people are learning to of take care of themselves, bond with their families. I think that that's one of the greatest things. They found out how much their children learn, what they are learning, being a part of that learning circle. And so teachers didn't was stop raising people's kids. I really feel like that, because now parents got to slow down and understand the
Mm.
challenge, which I think they're going to, when the world fully opens back up and kids go back to school, parents are going to have a different appreciation for the teachers, because I think teachers are some of the most undervalued people in this world, and it gave them value. It showed the world how strong and how needed our institutions of education are. So I think that's one of the biggest spins. I also think that it challenged people to tap into their purpose, because some of them lost jobs. So they had to find something else. So it gave them a strength that they never knew that they had. I think it blossomed a lot of businesses. yeah, I think that's one of the things that kind of helped me, be more sustainable
Mm,
in my businesses. And at one time, I worked for the federal government, and unlike some people who were losing jobs, I resigned from mine to work 100% for myself because there was value there for me and the traction there. And I was convicted. It was like, you know what, take this leap, bet on yourself at this point, and and just go ahead and 100% work for yourself. So I became a full-time entrepreneur during the pandemic. So it did for
mm.
me have a lot of positives, and it had a lot of positives for people that I knew who got to see how strong they really are.
That's definite positive. And maybe
Yes.
ask questions. Like, this is the challenging of social institutions. And social institutions are really just constructs. In many ways,
Yes.
they don't actually exist. They just are stories, they're narratives, they're beliefs that we have. And when people start asking questions, then the ones that you think have been there forever start to fall apart. And that gets interesting because then we're saying, well, why do we need this? Why are we doing things like
Yes.
this? And that's going to be interesting. And you can see why those that have a vested interest in maintaining the narrative want to
Yes.
make sure that that goes away. Don't ask too
Of
many
course.
questions. Don't look behind the curtain, right? We want to keep it as it is. Just get back to work, get back to the same. So it's going to be an interesting time. And, we see a lot of flourishing. Like you mentioned mental health, for example, people talking about this, people talking about issues which, like everything 20 years ago, nobody talked about mental health. Nobody talked
At
about
all.
LGBTQ. Nobody talked about even, okay, people talked about race, but not in the context of what it's talked about today. So
Yes.
there is a platform, there is a forum, and it needs to be used positively. So hopefully things like this enable it, because
Yes.
in many ways, anybody can step up with a microphone, anybody can write a book, anybody can start a podcast, right? So
But
long
it
may
all
it
starts with
continue.
taking care of yourself. So that's what I loved about the pandemic. It allowed people to actually take care of themselves.
Yes. Positive action, positive change.
Yes.
Pamela Gurley, Dr. Pamela Gurley, everybody. Where can we find out more about you?
I can be found on all social media at IAMDRPGURLEY. I am Dr. P. Gurley. For all of my business content and writing and consulting, it's www.clarkenhillenterprise.com. And I can be found on Facebook and Instagram at Clark and Hill Enterprise.
Fantastic. Pam, thank you so much for joining us today. A real privilege. And thank you for sharing a bit about your journey as well.
And thank you so much for having me. I definitely appreciate it. It was worth waking up so early in the morning for.